Hey guys, what's up? I'm back at it again with another solo episode. Still very difficult to get guests. I find it so funny. So many of my friends, they ask, how can I support the podcast? How can I help out? And honestly, the biggest way you can help out right now is helping me find guests. That seems to be the biggest struggle. But it's such a blessing to have that be a struggle, right? Like you have the ambition, the goals, the routines. All you need is just the guests. I think I'm so blessed in that regard. So no guest for today. It'll be a solo episode. We have some really, really interesting episodes coming up. We also nearly have the studio complete and set up and ready to go, which I'm so excited for. I can't wait for you guys to see the final result. I think it's going to look so great. So for today, this was a bit of a last minute decision. I was supposed to have a guest come on later today, but unfortunately something came up in his life and he can't make it today. So I had to kind of pull something out of my ass. And this might be low-hanging fruits that I'll be taking today, but I'm going to do some reactions, and specifically some reactions to some self-improvement hot takes. So for those of you that don't know, Reddit has a whole thread called r/self-improvement, and some guy recently asked for hot takes on there, and some of them were decently hot takes. Some of them were not so hot takes, but I actually disagree with most of them. So I'm going to go through them, give my opinion on them, and give why I don't agree with a lot of them or why I do agree with some of them. And then I'm going to give some stats to kind of back my stance. And after that, we'll also just go through some of my favorite quotes lately and what they mean to me and why do I actually enjoy these quotes. You may have noticed I'm a big quote guy. The reason is I think they distill a lot of information into a very succinct way that is easy to follow and digest. And almost become mantras and say things you just remind yourself constantly throughout the day. So I'll be going for some of my favorite ones and why they mean a lot to me. So the first hot take I want to challenge is one person commented, whatever you do consciously doesn't work if you're filled with negative subconscious beliefs. Until you fix your internal programs, you run in circles. You can't use willpower for lasting change. Big disagree. And that might be surprising to some people because they think, no, you have to be happy with the inside before it starts radiating outwards. And I'm not saying you shouldn't go work on your insides and whatnot. You should do some soul searching, you should do some meditation, journaling, therapy, all these things that help you fix your inside. But I don't think you should put a blocker on external progress because of internal blockers. And what I mean by that is most of the time you're not going to feel ready. Most of the time you're not going to feel like you're in a state where you can start working on yourself. You're going to think there's things that are blocking you. And it's that old homage of if I only went to the gym whenever I felt good enough to exercise, I would never go to the gym. And I think the same thing applies for standing up for yourself and working on yourself. And there's some studies that kind of agree with this. There was a 2021 meta-analysis that was published in the Journal of Consulting and Clinical Psychology. And it was basically comparing behavioral activation, which is called BA, versus the more popular one, cognitive behavioral therapy. Most of you might be familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy. Is that therapy where you basically adjust how you react and think of things. There's a lot of internal work that goes to cognitive behavioral therapy. And I love cognitive behavioral therapy. I practice it quite often because I have a lot of patterns I need to break in myself. But this study was comparing the two of them. And what behavioral activation is changing your habits towards things. That's acting on things. So it's kind of the two sides of the person speaking about conscious effort towards something and subconscious beliefs, because cognitive behavioral therapy is tackled by subconscious beliefs, while behavioral action tackles the conscious things that you do. And they isolated the two. So they did behavioral activation as one, cognitive behavioral therapy as the other. Well, actually, I should really say that. They did behavioral activation as one, whereas you only do behavioral activation. And then cognitive behavioral therapy, they included behavioral activation. And what they found was that the behavioral activation alone had a standardized mean difference of 0.52. What does that mean? Standard mean difference is an analytics they use, or a form of analytics they use in meta-analysis studies. And what it basically means is you take the mean of both the things and you compare them while taking standard deviation into account. That's like a basic rundown of it. So it's basically a better way of comparing the means. And the closer you get to 1, the more significant. So you might think 0.52 is not that significant. But in terms of standard mean difference, that's a huge variance. And also in terms of just how surveys and clinical studies go, that is a big difference. It had a standard mean difference of 0.52, while the full package of cognitive behavioral therapy had a standard mean difference of 0.44. That's a difference of 8 percentile points. That's huge in statistics. And what that means is that actually just acting on the thing often led to better results than thinking about how you tackle the thing and doing the thing. So what I want to say is you don't have to, you can show up for yourself when you're not sure. You can show up for yourself when you have doubts. You can show up for yourself when you don't feel like it, when you don't feel confident, when you don't feel like you're good enough. You can still show up. Yeah, it's difficult and you run out of willpower and motivation at some points, but I don't think that every single time you feel bad about something is a reason to not do the thing. Every time you feel a little bit sick, it's not a reason to not go to the gym. And the way people like to frame this is like you get your best results when you feel your best. That's true. And I'll concede that if you do things in a bad mental state or when you're not fully capable, you can get subpar results. For sure. But subpar results better than no results. So even when you don't feel like showing up for yourself, show up anyways. Do the thing anyways. Even if you don't feel great, do it anyways. Don't wait for yourself to be mentally okay, or mentally 100% rather, before you start acting on the things you want to act. Otherwise, you're never going to act on them. You're just going to sit around and continue to be passive. You can start working on things even when you don't have it all sorted out. The next one is if you're just starting out on your journey and you're having trouble taking the first step, or you keep telling yourself you'll do it tomorrow, then sorry to say, but you truly don't want to self-improve, because if you truly wanted it, you would have done it already. I disagree with this one with some level of contingency in place. So you might have noticed that on the channel, I've been discussing a lot on what's the difference between a person whose self-hate or self-doubt turns into motivation, and a person whose self-hate or self-doubt turns into victimhood or victim mentality. And I think I finally found my answer, or at least an answer that I'm happy with. I'm not sure on how to solve it, but I'm sure that I think this is the reason why it's happening. I think the difference is a lot of the things you do now are defense mechanisms built when you're a child. And I'll phrase it like this, right? Let's say you have issues with your weight as a kid. You're an obese kid or whatever. This was my case. I was an obese kid. And it's something you want to change. Or it's something you don't feel good about, rather. In the process of not feeling good about it, you as a child try to develop something that makes you feel better about it. It takes away the suffering, or takes away the pain, or takes away how it makes you feel, right? You're left with two options. Maybe you start exercising, the results come, and then you feel better, and then your way of coping with your weight problems is exercise. The other option is you find ways of drowning out that feeling. That could be video games, eating food, some other bad coping mechanism. Whichever one works first is the one you're going to stick with. So you build this childhood coping mechanism around the problem, and then you keep it there so that you can defend yourself from the bad feelings. And then you have to unlearn this as an adult. And some people, they just happen to choose the positive one first, and that helps them build positive ways of dealing with this problem. Some people happen to choose a negative one, and that helps them deal with the problem. Either way, what you find is it's really hard to unlearn those characteristics as you've grown up. So people that exercise to deal with the weight problems find it difficult to sit down and talk to somebody and psychologically analyze why they have this big fear of the weight, you know? Other people that chose the numbing portion, where it's like, let me just drown out, find it very difficult to exercise. So once you've chosen your coping mechanism, it's very hard to change it. There's a study that actually agrees with this, made by the CDC and something called the Kaiser Permanente. And they studied what's called landmark ACE, which is adverse childhood experience. And they took a bunch of people who would get scored on their adverse childhood experience. So how much is something that happened in their childhood affecting their current day, or how severe was your childhood experience? And I think there's like a score from 0 to 5 you could rate a person. And they found individuals with a score of 4 or higher were 260% more likely to struggle with focus and task completion than those with a score of 0. So what happens to you in your childhood most definitely sticks with you. And I think this thing of if you wanted it, you'd go get it. I think these people do want it, but the thing that they've built to deal with the problem is so strongly ingrained into them that they can't get themselves to leave it. So it's not that they don't want it, it's that they have this sticking point they can't get past. How you get past that sticking point, I'm not sure, but I think the first thing to do, just like any problem, is recognizing it, acknowledging it, and being like, oh, this worked for me as a child. I built this defense mechanism as a child, but it's no longer serving me. Because whatever defense mechanism you built as a child, congratulations, it worked. You made it to be an adult, and you're not a serial killer. But that doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. And yeah, you didn't know there was a better way back then, but now you do. And now we have to find a way to get you out of this current stuck fixation into a better one. So I don't believe it's just simply as easy as if you want it, you go get it. I think there are other factors that come into play here. I think that maybe it's a general statement. It's true. Like if you wanted something, you could do it. If you believed in something, you'd act in a way that showed you believed in it. That's true. But just because you're not acting a certain way doesn't mean you don't believe in it. So I disagree with that, but I also put the caveat on there that it's probably because you have a defense mechanism that's already worked for you in the past and that you now need to leave. The folks complaining about failure either didn't make enough effort or weren't patient enough. I agree. I'll put some conditions on this though. I agree with people give up on their dreams way too quickly. Like you built your current personality traits over the course of years and it didn't get fixed in the course of months, and then you blame it on external things except for time. I think that's a very common cycle people fall into. But I think there's a bigger issue at play where it's unrealistic expectations. And I hate saying this because the way I talk about it makes it sound like I'm setting very low goals just to clear the bar, which I don't think is what I'm doing. There's a very popular paper published by some guys called Bueller, Griffin, and Ross on what's called the planning fallacy. And what essentially it is, it asks a group of students to plan out some tasks and see how well they were at succeeding these tasks. And the outcome is something like, on average, people underestimate task duration by 64%. 64% is a lot. That means the majority of people, 2 out of 3 people, could not complete the task on time. And what that means is that people are very bad at estimating what they're capable of. And it goes back to that homage I hate telling people, like, you can do anything. You can't do anything. And I think if you set unrealistic goals, it don't matter how long you take or how much effort you put in, sometimes it's not achievable. Oh, I hope you guys can't hear that dog losing himself in the background. But basically, I'll say like this: if you're a 5'6" person and your goal is to go into the NBA, no matter how much effort you put in, how much time you put in, you're probably not going to the NBA. So you do have to stick with things, but you also have to have realistic goals. When I first started gymming, I was 15 years old. I was like, I want to be 80 kgs lean. I'm now an adult and I weigh 76 kgs and I'm not even close to lean. I've been gymming for, what's this now, 11 years. So I was never going to hit that goal without putting special sauce in my arsehole, but maybe even then I wouldn't make that goal. So it's not a matter of I didn't put enough effort or I didn't put enough patience. Yes, could I be better physically if I put more effort and patience in? For sure, but I wouldn't. I think the idea that I had for my body, the leanness that I wanted, I'd be around 70 kgs now. To add 10 kgs of muscle to that is pretty much biologically impossible for me. So did I fail partly because I didn't put enough time and effort into it? Yes. Did I also fail because my expectations were unrealistic? Also yes. It's a combination of having realistic goals and realistic expectations and then putting in the time and effort that truly determines whether you're going to fail or not. Billions of humans have existed before us and exist at the same time as us. Every emotion, thought, problem, existential crisis, etc., we experience has already been lived by someone else. Many of those someones have written books about their experiences and have been doing so for centuries. There's a wealth of information building on top of each other throughout history. Yet modern people still try to reinvent the wheel. Reading a few autobiographies would do people some wonders to improve their mental health, maturity, problem solving skills, etc. But they prefer to watch generic self help YouTube videos instead. The solutions to most people's problems are right in front of them. If they tried looking for the answers, read a book, or at least Google the problem. Absolutely agree. Perfectly said. I love the idea of you're not special, your problems are not unique. Do you really think the things you're struggling with, you are the first person to deal with them? Do you really think that your problems are so great, that you are so uniquely constructed, that your issues are unsolvable? Absolute BS. Absolute BS. There's someone who's gone through the exact same experience as you. Maybe not exact same detail for detail, but similar enough that you can learn from them and you can solve your problems through the wisdom that they've gained through their experience. And there's actually a form of therapy called bibliotherapy, which uses books as your primary tool. And there's actually a meta-analysis study done this as well. I know I reference a lot of meta-analysis studies, but in psychology and self-improvement, they're probably the go-to standard. But there's a meta-analysis study that was done that research that found that mild to moderate depression, when bibliotherapy was applied to people that have that, it had an efficacy rate of 70%. 70%. That is better statistically in most cases to actual therapy, face-to-face therapy. So what does that mean? It means that for most people, because most people are mildly to moderately depressed, not everyone's extremely depressed, for most people, reading a couple of books could help you as a 70% efficacy rate. Now, they didn't say which kind of books it is. And I think there's different ways of dealing with a problem. There's solving the problem, there's coping with the problem. And maybe some people read books to cope with the problem. So an example of that is fantasy. Fantasy fiction are what you would consider I'm forgetting the word now, but it's basically distracting yourself. Same thing as Netflix, same thing as alcohol. Man, there's a term for it, and now it's escaping me and it's bothering me. Escapism. It's a form of escapism where you escape the problem by not thinking about it. That's also true, and that's probably contributing to that. Some people just need a distraction because their mind becomes this endless spiral. But in that list of bibliotherapy, there's also probably people reading self-help books, autobiographies, people overcoming stories. I'm pretty sure a lot of people today can relate to David Goggins' story, and maybe they read his book and that helps them, and it probably does in 70% of the cases. There can also be spiritual and religious texts, like I think the Bible, the Quran, other books like this. They help people deal with the problems and they give a perspective and makes your problems feel lesser. So if you're feeling down, go find some book that speaks to what you're struggling with. And I think the best way of doing this is journal your feelings. Especially when you're feeling bad, journal your feelings, write them down. Try and find a connecting thread between your feelings. I did this last year, and the big connecting thread for me was confidence issues. Not feeling confident in myself. I wanted more confidence in my friendships. I wanted more confidence in my romantic pursuits. I wanted more confidence in my work and all of these things above. I wanted more confidence. That was the connecting thread amongst all my problems. And I sat down and journaled, and that's how I realized it. And then once you sit down and journal and you find a common thread between your problems, find people that are known for dealing with those problems. I found Coach K. I found Chris Williamson. And I found Charlie Herbert, I think is his name, Charisma on Command. And go see what they've said. Read their books, watch their videos, consume their content so that you can get an idea of where you need to go to improve the feelings you're doubting yourself on. So that'd be my recommendation. Journal, find the underlying thread, find people that are experts on that thread and see what they think. I call that DIY philosophy. So go do that and see what resolutions you can come to from this research that can help you deal with your problems. Long-term consistency matters more than short-term intensity. I don't think that's a hot take at all. I think most people recognize that. Maybe most people don't actualize it, but a lot of people realize that. Um, but I also do want to mention something because I have this mentality of competence breeds confidence, not confidence breeds competence. And what that means is you have to get things right first before you get confidence in doing them, right? Like I can't be confident in my golf swing where I've never played golf before. And there was some studies done by this guy named Albert Bandura. And he does a lot of studies on self-efficacy. And he does study that try to find the predictors for what's a predictor for if you're going to stay with a new habit or hobby or whatever. And he found that the most important predictor, the number one predictor of whether or not you're going to stick with a habit or hobby or not, is called mastery experiences. So that's intense, successful moments. That's the number one predictor of whether or not you're going to stick with something. And it goes counterintuitive to what people think, because people think that I've made it in this field because I've worked hard and I had more grit and determination than other people. True to some extent, but you also probably got some luck on it. I think the best example is any survey you do at a gym is biased because you're surveying people at a gym. You're selecting for people that were naturally good at what the gym would provide. If you started exercising and let's say you did a bench press, and your first couple months you get to 60 kgs on a bench press, you're more likely to stick with it. Just because 60 kgs is a rare achievement, a lot of people can't hit 60 kgs, especially on the first few weeks or first few months of lifting. So you had some sense of mastery experience now where for your skill level relative to where you started, you were better than other people in it. And then you kept going to the gym. The guy who goes to the gym and for 5 months can't get more than 40 kgs on the bench press, he's likely not going to stick with it because he hasn't had any sense of, this is for me. Same thing with running. If you run and your first few runs, you get a sub 6 minute kilometer, you're more likely to stick with it than the guy that's saying a 7:30 kilometer every single time. So there is some sense of, if you get small wins in the beginning, it's a lot easier to stick with it long term. That doesn't mean you shouldn't stick with things just because it's not coming to you naturally, but I think it's going to be a lot easier if you find things that you're truly made for, things that come naturally to you. You're going to stick to those much better. So, like, the piece of advice I'll give on there is try to find small wins to give you the motivation to keep with that long-term intensity. So find the short-term intensity things that lead to long-term intensity things. So for example, if you're trying to lose weight and the first week you lose 2 kgs, that's going to propel you forward. You're going to be like, this is working, it's going to keep going. And that'll keep you going through the moments of doubt. So I think set yourself up for small wins in whatever task you're doing. For me, on the confidence one, it would be, I would go talk to random people at the gym, people I didn't know. And if I got a smile out of them, I'm like, okay, that was a win. And I let that, like, okay, I got 2 smiles today, 3 smiles today. And then that kept going. And now I have a lot more confidence. Still working on it, still not great. But the small wins are enough to propel me forward and keep me going on it. So I do agree, long-term consistency is super important, but don't underestimate the value of short-term wins. The less self-help content you consume, the more content you'll be in the process of self-helping. Hard agree. And I'm going to try and coin a new phrase here. The man who reads 50 books is smart. The man who acts on 5 books is wise. And I think there's an element of a phrase I heard from Mark Manson that I love, where he said, procrastination is learning is the procrastination of the intelligent man. It's a very deadly habit to fall into. Because learning feels very productive. Learning feels like you're making progress. But there's a difference between learning something in the sense of you are aware of it and acting on something. There's a study called the Active Learning Impact Study done in 2024, where I found that passive learners, so passive readers, watchers, consumers, they only retain about 10 to 20% of information after 1 week, while active learners, people that practice and implement the things they learn, show 93.5% retention. That's about like a 4.5x multiplier of more efficacy. So what that means is you need to focus less on learning as much as possible and acting on as much as possible. So I like to say I don't jump from self-help book to self-help book to self-help book. I'll maybe read 3 self-help books in a year, and I'll read about 5 or 6 fiction books in a year. For the reason that I don't want to go to the next self-help book until I feel like I've properly implemented the lessons from the first self-help book. Otherwise, I've learned nothing. So I agree. If you consume less content on self-help, you're more likely to actually act upon the things that you do learn. And that goes to intent. You have to be intent on actually implementing these things, because you can learn everything and not do anything about it. There's a similar vein of, if you try to solve too many problems at once, you're going to end up solving no problems. And then what have you learned? So I definitely agree with this. I think that people should more actively apply the things that they're consuming before going on to the next one. So maybe like after you finish a book, after you finish a video, write 4 or 5 goals that you've gotten from this video. Keep it small, very small, and act upon those. So right now I'm reading Atomic Habits, and I'm not going on from Atomic Habits until I've implemented the lessons from there. And Atomic Habits has 4 big lessons to my knowledge. Make it obvious, make it easy, make it attractive, make it rewarding. I'm on make it obvious. And I'm not going to consume more until I've mastered the art of making it obvious. And I've started with a few things. So I've listed small hobbies that I'm going to make obvious, and then I'm going to master those hobbies, or habits rather. And then when I learn the second lesson, I'm going to make a new list of habits that I want to start based on that lesson. And that's active learning. And that way you retain a lot more of what you learn, and you actually apply the things that you're learning. Too many people with relationship issues think the solution is just to get in shape. Newsflash, losing weight and gaining muscle won't fix problems like lack of emotional intelligence or conflict avoidance. Go to the gym, sure, but therapy is just as important. I'm going to disagree with this somewhat, because I think this guy is missing the problem of most people. I don't think if you ask most people, what's your current dating problem, the answer would be, man, like, I just can't, keep someone around. Like, the relationship falls apart after a while. That's not what people are saying. The problem that most people are having, especially in the self-help space, is they can't get dates. They can't. And I think that we as a society try to poo-poo on looks, like, oh no, it's about what's on the inside that matters. We all have biases towards attractive people. The halo effect is so powerful. I always reference a study by Waldstone et al. Done in like 1966, which is a long time ago, but like it's still relevant today. Well, essentially it took 752 students, paired them up for blind dates, and then measured stuff like personality, intelligence, and physical attractiveness, and then saw the correlation between all those factors and what was your chances of getting a second date with that person. Physical attractiveness was the only significant factor. The only one in predicting would a person get a second date. And showed personality intelligence had near zero correlation with initial dating success. Near zero. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. Like, yes, you need a good personality, you need emotional intelligence, and you need to have yourself sorted to maintain a healthy relationship. But to get into one, you need to not be ugly, as harsh as that sounds. You're going to get much more chances at a relationship if you look good. And the more chances you have, the more success you have. It's almost like if I wanted to roll 6 on dice, and I mastered everything about how to roll dice perfectly to get your outcome, but I got very few chances to actually throw the dice, I would probably never hit a 6. And that analogy is like, how many times you get to throw a dice depends on how attractive you look. How good you are rolling the dice depends on the inner work you do. I think most people struggle. They don't get chances to roll the dice. And this has been exacerbated even more in our society, where most people meet online now. And meeting online, you need to have way more attractiveness than meeting in person. So does that mean that the only way to do it is to meet online? No, obviously not. And there's a lot of caveats to this. But I think the main takeaway is you still need to look good to get the chances. You don't need to be a 10 out of 10, but being a 5 out of 10 is not going to help you. And what's a way of looking better is getting in better shape, losing weight, gaining some muscle, being in good conditioning, then working on things like your hygiene, your grooming, your style. All those things are going to get you way more chances. So I do agree in the sense that Emotional intelligence and personality help you keep the relationship, but you still need to get to the point where you're even offered a relationship. And that's what most people struggle with. So the general advice I would help the most of people is get in shape and look better. And it's harsh to hear, but it's the truth. So that's all from the hot take segment. Now I'm going to go to some quotes I've been trying to live by. And the main one that's inspired me is Carl Jung's quotes. I think Carl Jung is brilliant. I'm so sad I've only found him now, and I'm really interested in reading a lot of his work. For you, those of you that don't know who Carl Jung is, he was a Swedish psychiatrist that lived in I think about the 80s or 90s, around about there. And he popularized a lot of really common terms that we use nowadays. So the words introvert, extrovert, and archetype were created by, or the concepts were created by Carl Jung. And he had a very carpe diem mentality towards life, a very seize the day, a very like almost Nietzschean Übermenschen view on things. And he had this great quote that I'm going to be paraphrasing, but he essentially says, pain has nothing to teach those that aren't willing to learn from it. Brilliant insight. I love that. All that trauma you experience goes to naught if you don't do anything about it. If you just sit there with it. It's only those who are willing to act upon the pain and change the outcomes that have learned something from it. And I think that's super important. That's a mentality I've been trying to have. I guess I've been hurt in the past. I've had these issues and I still get hurt now. I had these things that are causing me pain. But if I don't learn anything from them, they're going to keep on causing me pain. So that's a great mantra that I've been following. Another one is by Nietzsche himself. I think for those of you that don't know who Nietzsche is, he's this German philosopher that lived quite a while ago. I think he lived in the 1800s or so. And he is very popular for his God is dead takes, which I don't agree with him, but I do agree with some of his comments on like your life and how he popularized this term called Übermenschen, which means self-driven, which means you are in control of your life. You have to give it meaning. You have to give it purpose. And it's very funny because Nietzsche, if you learn about Nietzsche the person, Nietzsche the things that he says, they're quite contradictory because Nietzsche was very much a victim of his circumstances. He had a lot of health issues and he had debilitating migraines and he was very pessimistic about his own life. But he always preached this, you take control of your life, you do something with it. You have to make your own path in life. And it's possibly because he was preaching to the person he wished he could be. But I still think there's some great insights I gave. And I think one of my favorite quotes from Nietzsche is, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. What that's trying to tell you is, if you have a solid reason for something, it doesn't matter what comes in the way, you will overcome it. And I love that one. I think that's great. I think most people have very flimsy whys, and then they fall, and then they don't get back up and they wonder why. I think that's why religion is very effective for a lot of people, because if your why is as mighty and all-powerful God, then how could you give up? How could you not keep going? But if your why is, I want to get a lot of money and get a lot of hoes, then I'm sorry to say this, but as soon as you don't get money and you don't get the hoes, or even if you do get the money, you do get the hoes, it's not going to make you satisfied. It's not going to keep you going on that path. It's a very flimsy why to do things. So find a strong why to live and the hows will become irrelevant. Next one I really love lately is Viktor Frankl. He was a psychiatrist and a Holocaust survivor. So someone who obviously went through a lot of turmoil in their life, and he founded something called logotherapy. And I find his quote very interesting given his context, because his context was, or his quote is, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. That's coming from the perspective of someone that was stuck in the Holocaust, someone that was probably stuck in concentration camps. He had no control over his situation. He only had control over himself. And having control over himself didn't mean he got to change the situation. He was still in the Holocaust. But it made things easier for him. It made him capable of getting through it. And I think that's what's important. When you can't change your situation, you can change how you interpret it. And I think that's very important. If you are a victim of your circumstances, then you will always be a victim. But if your circumstances are just something that happens, and how you interpret life and how you go through life is your own choice, then you can make a difference in things. Oh, There's a brilliant one. Always love this one. There's many variations of this one, but I've been liking Bruce Lee's take on it, where he says, "Do not pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a difficult one." I was at Connect Group last night, and someone said something super profound, where he said, "No one that followed, none of the early martyrs of Christianity had an easy life. No, none of them had peace. But then you pray for peace." I think it's such a powerful perspective on it. Like, you can't wish to be a strong man and wish for an easy life. Those things don't go together. It reminds me of this post I read where it said, "You pray for strength and you were given difficult times. You prayed for passion and you were given doubts. You prayed for love and now you're given relationship problems. You got everything you prayed for." I think that's brilliant. A good movie is not devoid of conflict. In fact, it's full of it. Similarly, a good life is not devoid of conflict. It's full of it. I think the other version of this quote that I love, that really stuck with me, was JFK. I think it's during the Vietnam War. He said, "Do not pray for easier times, wish to be stronger men, or pray to be stronger men." Love that. You should not be looking to get to a place where you're not challenged. You should be looking to be a strong enough person that no matter what challenges come your way, you solve them. I think that's a big shift in focus from eliminating hardships to cultivating discipline. And that goes a super long way. This is another one from Carl Jung that I love. It says, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Everything he says is fire. Everything. I don't care. Okay, no, not everything. He had some questionable takes, but that is fire. I think that it kind of goes with the quote of, now the quote is eluding me, but it's essentially like, what shame is it that you didn't get to realize your full potential? I think no one realizes the full potential and is disappointed with it. I think it's only people that fall shy of the true potential that are sad about it. So it's a privilege to become someone great. It's a privilege to be a mentor, a leader, someone successful, someone physically fit. It's a privilege to be that. And that's the best part about life, is becoming who you were truly meant to be. This one's from someone called Brene Brown, a research professor, studies a lot of shame, courage, connection, those kind of things. And they said, vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. I love the creativity and change part of it, or especially the creativity part. I recently heard this very good quote that said, "You can't white knuckle creativity." And for those of you that don't know what white knuckling is when you just bite down on your jaws and you just keep going and you get through grit and determination. That's white knuckling. I absolutely agree with that. I think if you want to make meaningful art, and I call a lot of things art, but if you have a craft that you really want to create something meaningful from, you're gonna have to be vulnerable. Think about like artists. A lot of their music and artwork that they produce is from their own personal struggles. And if they're not vulnerable to those struggles, they're never going to be able to create great art from it. So if you want to create something really meaningful and really beautiful, take the thing that hurts you the most and turn it into the paintbrush that you use to paint your canvas. And that's when you can create something super meaningful. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." I think it's a very strong take on autopilot existing. If you don't ever think about your life, you're probably just coasting through it. I think there's a amount of thinking about your life that's necessary to build a life that's worth living. And I think a lot of people fall into the trap where they just don't think about it. They're just like, "Oh man, that's depressing. Who wants to think about that?" If it's depressing, then you need to think about it and you need to challenge yourself on it. I'll end with a classic one by Henry Ford. Well, obviously, Henry Ford, terrible person. Don't listen to everything that he has to say. But I think he had a great quote. I think most people know that he coined this, but he coined the term, "Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right." And it's true. I think if you think you can, you're going to keep on going on it. And if you think you can't, you're not even going to try. And it's a trying that's the important part. Now, obviously, there's limitations to this. If I think I can fly, that doesn't mean I can fly, right? But it means I'll try to fly. And that's close enough to it that it's okay with me. So I think someone said brilliant to me the other day, and something I'm still struggling with, where she said, if you're not your own biggest fan, then no one else will be. It's something I think about a lot. And I'm trying to be my own biggest fan, showing up for myself. And that's why I'm recording the solo episode. I recently thought about it. Success is showing up when no one believes in you, including yourself. Do I feel great about the podcast recently? No. Feel horrible about the podcast recently. Do I feel great about the things I'm trying to achieve in life? No, I feel horrible about it. I'm in a bit of a slump right now, I'll be honest. But I'm still showing up. And I hope that in showing up one day I can look back at it and be like, damn, I'm happy I still went for it. I'm happy I still pitched up, picked up the mic, wrote a script and did it. Even if this podcast isn't going on, at least I know that I was willing to do the tough things even when I didn't feel like it. So where you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Where you think you can or you think you can't, do it anyways. Do it anyways. There's a brilliant quote in Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, where he said, if you're right more than 50% of the time, you'd go to the stock market and you make billions. But you're not and you don't. Because you're more often than not wrong about things. So if that's true, then you're more often than not wrong about yourself. And that swings both ways, and that's fantastic. Because that means when you think you can't do something, it's probably a good chance you still can. When you think you can do something, probably a good chance you can't. So what's the only way to figure out? Just go out and do it. Just go out and do it anyways, man. So that'll be it. This will be a shorter one. These solo episodes are really hard to drag out. So if you want to help me by not having me do these solo episodes, volunteer to come to the podcast. All are invited and all are welcome. We'll have anybody, free thinkers, entrepreneurs, artists, influencers, your mom's computer, your dad's computer, doesn't matter. We'll take you on. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please like, follow, subscribe, comment, share this with a friend. Until next time, have a great day. Peace.